You go live, please, then let me know.
We're live, Your Worship.
Great, thank you. Council, I'd like to call this regular council meeting of August 9th, 2022 to order with adoption of the agenda. Someone want to make that motion for me? Councillor Gillette, seconded by Councillor Palmer. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting of July 26th. Councillor Gillette, seconded by Councillor Palmer. All in favor? Motion's carried. Any business arising from those minutes? Seeing none, I'll move on to announcements from the mayor. The only thing that I have this week is just to let the community know nomination packages for council. Those who want to run for council are available at City Hall. You can pick them up in person, or you can go online on the city's website and you can see the packages there and print them off if you so desire. Nomination packages, I believe, need to be back into city between August 30th and September 9th. All right, we're going to move on to number 9A, bylaws, water regulation amendment, bylaw 2341, and sewer regulation, bylaw 2342. So someone want to put item number 1 on the table, please. Councillor Gillette.
The water regulations amendment bylaw number 2341 be adopted.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Elliott. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Item number 2, please. Councillor Gillette.
That sewer regulations amendment bylaw number 2342 be adopted.
Seconder for the motion. Councillor Elliott. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried. Item 9B, MRDT. Councillor Gillette.
That City of Revelstoke Municipal and District Tax Levy Amendment Bylaw number 2343 be read a first, second, and third time.
Seconder for that motion. Councillor Elliott. Any discussion or questions of staff on that? Councillor Gillette.
I'm just curious to hear more about this expansion to the CSRD for accommodators for the taxes. I think this is the first I've heard about it. I'm just looking to get a general feel for the relationship between our local in-town accommodators and out-of-town accommodators, how that fits with the conversations.
Okay, Ms. Brown, comment?
Yes, through Your Worship to Councillor Gillette. I did mention it briefly in the reports that I gave that are linked in my council report of today, that we were exploring that with the CSRD. So far, we've had discussions with CSRD administrative staff as well as Director Brooks Hill with the CSRD, and who was amenable to expanding the area. In Golden, that already is included, partly because it started off with Kicking Horse being in the CSRD Area A, that it was included from the outset, all of the heli ski lodges and other accommodators. So we're looking to do the same thing in CSRD Area B, which would bring on board not just heli ski lodges, but also Airbnb short-term vacation rentals located outside the city, but in support of our accommodation associations tourism marketing efforts. So the idea is just to ensure that those association or those accommodation members are able to collect MRDT. There's been quite a few requests coming from them to us as to why they can't collect MRDT taxes. So this is a way to ensure that they have access to the governance, to the board structure of RAW, as well as to the marketing materials and the support that tourism provides.
Great. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, just related to that. So the CSRD doesn't have the same limitations on vacation rentals that we have in our community, right? So they have, do they have a limitation or anything on the CSRD and what goes on in the various residents?
Ms. Brown, comment?
From my understanding, no, they have limited restrictions in the CSRD Area B, with the result that there are quite a number of short-term vacation rentals operating in Area B. And by virtue of the fact that any Airbnb operator and other VRBO, which is a kind of accommodation sector, would be required by the organization that they market through to collect that tax. And that would go into a fund for affordable housing, which is one of the benefits of moving on this sooner rather than later.
And I think for those who are accommodators that don't have any special zoning for this, they can apply under a TUP and get their way to operate that way, but they haven't been able to ask for tax.
So the standards for the various short-term, like any safety concerns or fire things, are they universal or are they in the CSRD, or is that something we can apply?
Yeah, there's fire regulations in the CSRD.
Yeah, so there's no stand, but there's done, I know in the Revelstoke vacation world, if you own one, you have to have a certain standard to enact it, right? I wonder if that's the same for the CSRD. I just don't know.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm not positive on that.
From my understanding, there is very little regulation of short-term vacation rentals in the CSRD, and that is not something we're able to impact, at this point. But we can do is collect some of the taxation revenue from those accommodators, and again, those are guests and visitors to our community that are availing themselves of all of our recreational amenities, including the resorts. So they already are benefiting from the tourism efforts and the marketing that we do. So I think it makes sense, with the support of the CSRD, of course, to bring them into the fold, make sure that they have a voice on the board, and collect that revenue so that we can build our affordable housing, bucket.
All right. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item 11A, staff reports, alternate approval process, wastewater treatment facility. Mr. Black, any presentation before we go into this?
Excuse me, through your worship, no presentation at this time. Of course, available should council have any questions.
All right, thank you. Someone want to put item number 1 on the table for me, please? Councillor Shaw or Councillor Palmer? Go ahead.
Read the story.
Whereas the Council of the City of Revelstoke has given 3 readings to the wastewater treatment facility upgrade phase 1 loan authorization bylaw number 2240, which proposes an upgrade to the wastewater treatment facility and a debenture not to exceed $7 million be obtained to finance the construction of the wastewater treatment facility upgrade phase 1, which will be repaid over a period not to exceed 25 years. And whereas the Council of the City of Revelstoke cannot adopt number 2240 until approval of the electors has been obtained, therefore be it resolved that the corporate officer undertake an alternate approval process to determine the opinion of the electors with regard to the matter, and that Council hereby establishes the elector response form to allow for multiple elector responses, that a deadline for receiving the elector responses for submission to the corporate officer is 4:30 Tuesday, September 20th, and that the determination of the number of electors of the current area of the City of Revelstoke to which the approval process applies is 7529.
Seconder for that motion, please. Councillor Charlotte. Any discussion or questions? Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, long worded motion, but this is, we've had lots of dialogue, and I'm actually very pleased with the overall progress that we've made on the wastewater treatment facility. It's stuff that we know that needs to be done, and it helps us come into compliance with the province and where we're going to be in the future. So this is an important project, and I'm very supportive of the process. That's it.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Elliott.
So just for clarity, you're asking to, it was a long-winded approach, but we're asking for $7 million as a loan, possibly, we may not need that full amount. We gained $13 million from the province for infrastructure grants. In grants. So the total project is $20 million. We gained 13 and we're pitching in the rest.
Perfect.
Okay,
All right.
just so everyone's clear, and we may not need the $7 million.
Yeah. Any comment on that, Mr. Black?
Thank you, Your Worship. The grant is $10 million roughly, and the city component is 30% of that, which is approximately $5 million, which is based upon our current cost estimating. We are asking for a slight amount above that, just to be sure that we do not need to come back to the electorate to ask for additional money should that number come in. So we're very confident at this time that the project can be built within the budget and very likely under that $7 million threshold that we would borrow.
All right, thank you. Ms. McCabe, any comment? You, no? All right. Any follow-up, Councillor?
No.
Any other comments from councillors? I too am happy to see this starting to go forward, and maybe we'll be able to remedy our situations. So, anyway, yeah, absolutely. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Does someone want to start number 2 for me, please? Councillor Short.
I'll take this one. Whereas the Council of the City of Revelstoke has given 3 readings to School Road Safety Project Loan Authorization Bylaw number 2334, which proposes safety upgrades to the transportation network near Arrow Heights and Columbia Park Elementary Schools, and a debenture not to exceed $2 million be obtained to finance construction of the school road safety project, which will be repaid over a period not to exceed 15 years. And whereas the Council of City of Revelstoke cannot adopt number 2334 until the approval of the electors has been obtained. Therefore, be it resolved that the corporate officer undertake an alternate approval process to determine the opinion of the electors with regards to the matter, and that council hereby establishes the elector response form to allow for multiple elector responses, that a deadline for receiving elector responses for submission to the corporate officer is to be 4:30 p.m. Tuesday, September 20th, 2022, and that the determination of the total number of electors of the current area of the City of Revelstoke to which the approval process applies is 7529.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion, please? Councillor Palmer. Discussion on the motion. Mr. Black, any comments?
No, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Palmer?
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. Yeah, I'm supportive of the resolution. Some may recall that I was not supportive of the original project, which I still am not, but that project was supposed to be done this summer. And I think it's fortunate that we ran into some hiccups on that so that we can readdress the whole project, specifically with the asphalt pavement project on Perks, I think can be combined with this in next year. So this will be a potential legacy for the next council, but we're setting them up for success.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Elliott?
Just some, again, clarity. What the current area of the city road to which the approval process applies is 7529. Is that our population number?
Comment on that, Mr. Black, that number?
Through Your Worship, I would ask that Councillor McCabe, or I'm sorry, Councillor McCabe, Director McCabe, please address that.
Through Your Worship, I'll try not to pass the buck again because I do believe it was actually Ms. Floyd that came up with the number, but my understanding is it's the population adjusted for the percentage of our population that is voting age. So it's supposed to represent the number of voting people.
Wait a second. So we have a total population of 8,000 by census.
No, yeah. Sorry, the census is adjusted every year by the province. So it's taking the census for 2022, I believe.
It just doesn't make, but I'm sure we won't get anywhere near the response. I'm just curious, but I don't think that's, it corresponds to everything.
Oh, Cindy, thank you.
Sorry, Your Worship. So, Councillor Elliott, there is an attachment to the report that basically shows the estimated population being 8275. Of that population, the estimated number of people that are 18 or over is 6645. And then we also had to factor in the estimated number of non-resident property electors. So those individuals that own property in the city of Revelstoke but don't actually live here. So the census wouldn't have captured that number. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, is that normal to have that big a population over voting age, 18 and over? I mean,
yeah, the census came up. That's where I took the number from. So the census came up saying 80% of the population is 18 or over.
Wow.
Younger demographic.
I thought 2 kids was the goal, and yeah, I'm young. I don't know. I'm just baffled. That's very strange.
Your kids are voting age, aren't they?
Yeah, mine are. Sorry.
All right, any other comments on the motion on the table? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item 11B. All right, sanitary sewer. Any comment on that, Mr. Black, before I put the motion on the table?
Thank you, Your Worship. The residents of the Lower Arrow Heights around the hospital and basically west of Airport Road between Lee and Newlands have requested that the city consider creating a local area service district to finance sanitary sewer in the area. And this new sewer would connect to the new lift station that was constructed as part of the Newlands subdivision, which is right across the street from the hospital. And the documents in front of you do show the actual petition, the names on the petition, and a map showing where those petitioners live and the proposed preliminary layout of the sanitary sewer design. With council's affirmative action today, then staff will undertake formalizing the electoral vote for the area to ensure that we have, and I know Director McCabe will correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it is 50% plus of the owners and 50% of the value of all of the homes in that area are in support. Then we can proceed, and then we can create a district that would finance those improvements at the cost of those residents over a period of time, which at this time, I don't think we've established what that length of period is. And Director McCabe may add some more to that.
Any comments, Ms. McCabe?
No, I think he did really well explaining it.
Okay. So can I have a councillor put the motion on the table and we can discuss further? Councillor Gillette.
That a local area service process commence and be implemented for the Lower Arrow Heights sanitary service.
Seconder for that motion, please. Councillor Palmer. Further discussion on that motion? Councillor Ryan?
Is there an estimate of what it would cost to connect to this new septic or sewer?
You had to ask a question that I don't have the number right in front of me, but I believe it is attached to the engineer's cost estimate in the report. My recollection is approximately $5 million.
So per parcel, I mean, like what would it cost for an individual homeowner?
That too is broken down in the report. Ms. Floyd, would you be able to pull, or Rousseau, would you be able to pull up the attachment for this so that the public can see?
Yeah, I must be missing the per unit price and just seeing the total.
I have another question in the interim.
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Palmer.
Through to Mr. Black. Approximately how many people were, was this a large number of people that were asking for the local improvement area, or is it a small number?
My recollection is that it's actually quite a large number. I believe it was more than 50% of the residents included, and some of those are even on Lee Road, which has pipe in the ground, but that's not connected to any future or any sewer at this point in time. And so many of the residents down there have had homes for upwards of 40 years, and so they are starting to see the failures of their septic systems. And so it is coming to bear that it is in their best interest to get onto the sanitary sewer system. And in addition, it's also part of our liquid waste management plan that we get all of the community off of septic in the long term and get everybody to put their sanitary waste into the sewer system and to the wastewater treatment plant versus into the ground. I believe there was something popped up there for a second and it looks like it disappeared. My apologies.
I have another comment then.
Go ahead,
So on the resolution as it is, which I'm supportive of, and the reason I'm supportive of it is that, you know, it's based on what the residents want in that area, the majority of the residents, and including values. And so if there is a strong indication that they want that, I think that's appropriate. And aside from the net benefits for the entire city, for the residents there, it's basically in their control as to whether this proceeds as a local improvement or not.
So, Your Worship, and to Councillor Palmer, yes, you're absolutely correct that the residents have the choice here, and if they vote against this, that it will not proceed. If they do support this action, that all of the costs associated with this project would be part of their annual repayment of this project over a period of time, 15 or 20 years. And so if it doesn't go anywhere, it does not go anywhere. And then there's no cost except for us as a city to initiate the voter process.
What does
Councillor Ryan.
that process look like in terms of making sure that enough people are heard?
Director McCabe, please.
You're muted.
Sorry, through your worship, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I was just wondering what the process is for voting. How does the city make sure that every home gets their vote or whatever?
They would be, you know what, it's been a long time since we've done one of these, and I wasn't involved in the last one. My understanding is that letters were sent out to everybody to let them know, all the property owners. So I'm not sure if we do a similar process or not this time, or if we would do it electronic. I don't know if Ms. Floyd has anything to add.
Ms. Floyd.
So yes, Councillor Rind, I concur with Director McCabe in that, for example, when we did previous local area services, we did specific petitions for every property owner that was affected. And the engineer at the time had determined some calculation based on frontage. I don't know if it would be the same, Director Black, but so they knew in advance what connecting would cost them.
Okay, yeah, because that was gonna be my other question, was if the letters are gonna be sent out, like I still can't find that number in any of the attachments, but it should be explicit for each homeowner what their connection fees would be so that they know what they're actually voting on.
That's right. And I don't think it can be in the documents because we can't calculate until we know how the allocation is going to be done.
Right, but I think like an estimate, a range at this point for the purpose of this report makes sense, but as long as it's going to be specific once those letters are sent out, that's great. It would be nice to have a ballpark figure.
So,
And that is exactly correct. We do need to identify what their potential impact is by property.
Okay, so that'll be based on frontage, et cetera, correct? All right, thank you.
Correct.
So Ollie,
so the local area service agreement is for the pipe in the ground that's in the street.
and connecting it.
But the cost from the residents to the pipe is borne by the resident.
So the whole process is going to be borne by the entire area. Is that not correct if it goes forward? Yes.
That is exactly correct, Your Worship. And so everybody in the district and bounded, and I believe there is a figure in the one of the attachments to the report that does show that boundary along with the proposed preliminary layout of the sanitary sewer pipe is shown there. That district then separates the cost based on frontage for all of those units in that area, and then the cost is divided by the frontage. And so they're responsible for a portion of that frontage pipe for each property. And obviously, if there's two properties on either side, they get to share that cost. And so that's the process. It's very equitable, and it's been used in the community here. In other locations, Thomas Brook is an example, and it would be followed as part of our process for this project.
Yeah, I understand. On CPR Hill or Track Street, there's a frontage agreement that's in place, but any person who wants to connect to that pipe pays an extra fee. So maybe that's what people want to know is what's it gonna cost to, sure, the pipe in the ground is great, but I've got to spend another $10,000-15,000 to connect to it. This is the total cost of the endeavor. We should know that.
Exactly.
Councillor Elliott, to your worship, I believe that is a latecomers agreement where the project was built by another party, and as people connect to that existing pipe, they get to share in the cost of connecting to that because somebody paid for that up front. And so it's a slightly different process than this one, where we have all of the property owners participate in this project from day one. And so if we extend the pipe in the future, then those people extending outside of the boundary would then be responsible for reimbursing the rest of the neighborhood as part of a latecomers. But as the project is laid out, I believe we're catching every part of that south end of town onto the sanitary sewer system. And so I do not believe that a latecomers agreement would be applicable in this case, such as it is on CP Hill.
All right, any other comments on the motion on the table? Councillor Ryan.
Yeah, based on the map that's in here, there's one sort of like layout of the pipes in the newer part of that neighborhood where most residents were not in favor, probably because they have newer septic systems. Is there an option in this project that certain portions just wouldn't be included in that, or is it an all or nothing in that all the pipes will be laid to service all of those areas because you don't want to have any kind of outstanding works and service agreements?
In a perfect world, we would have all of the residents in that proposed district participate. If, for instance, the properties that are east of Airport Road choose not to participate, then they could be excluded from the project and that we would still have a viable project. As you know, the bigger the project is, the less cumbersome it is per parcel. And so the larger we can make the district, the more economic it is for the participants. Does that help clear the question or answer your question?
Yeah, I just think it might be a tough sell for some homeowners, but I'm interested to see how that works once they get their letters in the mail with the costs. And just to clarify to Councillor Elliott's point, because this is all happening at one time, there's no connection fees. It's just one fee that would be paid at the time once this gets rolled out. Is that right?
I'm not certain if that is correct. When those parcels were built or occupied, they were most likely paid a DCC based upon having a septic system versus a sanitary sewer connection fee. So based upon connecting to the new sewer, there may be a charge to pay for that difference between the sanitary sewer DCC and the septic DCC.
Okay, so I would ask that be also outlined in those letters.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right, any other comments on the motion on the table? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item C, water assessment report. Someone want to put that motion on the table? Councillor Charlotte.
That the water system pipe network assessment and 10-year replacement plan dated May 3rd, 2022, and additional utilities crew staffing be considered in the 2023 5-year financial plan.
Seconder for that motion, please. Hey, Councillor Elliott. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. So this is another thing that's getting passed on to the next council. That'll be considered in the 2023 budget, so no guarantees. 2023, I think, is going to be a very challenging year, 2023, 2024 for council on budget when we're seeing high inflation and there's going to be pressures overall. So don't be surprised, staff, that yes, we're in this consideration of another body of public works, which is probably appropriate. However, that might be coming from elsewhere in the budget when that's, when the council is sort of adjusting that. But this is for our core core services that we should be doing as a municipality. So I'm supportive of the motion.
All right. Other comments from other councillors?
Through your worship, if it's possible to have a very, very short little presentation that for the public's benefit, if that would be okay.
Sure. Ms. McCabe, I see your hand up. Do you want to ask your question before the presentation?
I just wanted to add a comment generally that this is kind of the last piece of the puzzle as far as the long-term financial plan goes and when it comes to asset management. And so we've got the condition assessments for the roads and the buildings and the sewer, and now we've finally got the water. And so this definitely helps support the numbers that we've been putting in the budget. We haven't been putting in quite enough, which we suspected, but this is calling for approximately 1.5 million a year, and the current budget includes 1.1. So it's just a further piece, another tool in the toolbox, so to speak, that engineering has got now, and that helps with engineering and finance to actually be able to provide better budget projections going into the future. So I'm very happy to see it finished.
Okay. Councillor Chalet, you have a comment before we do the presentation?
Oh, no, sorry.
Okay.
Right.
So, Mr. Black, if you could do your presentation, and then council may have other questions or concerns.
Thank you, your worship. Can you see that, council? And
Yes.
so here's where we are. We've got about 98 kilometers of pipe in the ground that represents the distribution system. We also have a piece of pipe which we call the transmission system, which is from Greeley into town. The pipes here, we have asbestos cement, cast iron, ductile iron, and PVC. Here's the breakdown of how old the pipes are. Over 90 years old, we have almost a kilometer of pipe. 75 to 90, 6.2 kilometers. 50 to 74, 15, and anything under 15 under 50 years is in relatively good shape. Here you can see where the oldest pipe are red, like a traffic signal. Red is bad, yellow is okay, green is good, and blue is really good. So you can see that most of the pipe that is old is based in the downtown core. The average life expectancy of the various pipe materials are 70 years for asbestos cement, 70 for the iron, and basically 100 years for PVC, and 80 for steel pipe and high density polyethylene. Here's where most of our iron pipe is, in the downtown core. So these are the areas where we're seeing the majority of our breaks, and these are the areas that we need to focus our energy on. So these are also the toughest for us to repair because they are in the most developed and densest part of the community. So it does end up costing a little bit more than it should for in other rural parts of the town. From a risk assessment basis, again, you can see, the red is bad, and again, the downtown core. And so we have for this year, and in this report, you can see that we're prioritizing pipe that's older than 70 years. The major areas that are at risk are the core areas. For this year, we are replacing, or have a tender out right now for replacing the pipe from 3rd to 8th Street on Mackenzie. And you can see on the map that is identified as one of those areas. We're also designing this year the replacement of pipe underneath Grizzly Plaza, which will then coincide with future improvements with Grizzly Plaza, so that we hopefully won't have to dig up Grizzly Plaza for 50 years or so once that new pipe is in the ground. As Director McCabe indicated, we've got a budget right now of 1.1 million, and our assessment completed by our consulting engineer team has indicated we need about 1.5 for the next 10 years. And that'll keep about 10% of our pipe less than their extended life cycle. So 6 or 7 kilometers will be older than their life cycle costs, which is something that, as Councillor Palmer is aware of, sometimes we don't get to replace everything that we want to as fast as we can, but by managing it on a risk-based process, we will minimize the number of pipe breaks and disruption to service. And the last thing, as Director McCabe pointed out earlier, was the staffing, that in order to manage these sorts of projects, it's beyond the small staff that we have here. And as we know that all of these projects are adding up and costing more money, it also takes staff in order to manage them properly. That concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Great. Follow up with questions. Councillor Palmer?
Thank you, Mayor Sulz, and thank you, Mr. Black, for the presentation. I note in the McElhaney report, the author in there is Mr. Derek Lowe, who was a long-term employee with the city of Revelstoke. So I think we have an asset with McElhaney in corporate knowledge that we thought we were losing, but looks like we've gained that back. So that's great. And I'll just reiterate my thanks to Mr. Lowe for his years of service with Revelstoke, and I'm pleased to see that he's still involved with improving our community. I like the report, and again, I've had discussions with Mr. Black and mentioned this in council about our asphalt program. And so definitely it's something that theme that you're hearing from me is an overlay with our asphalt program, so that this is a great potential overlay for that, so that we're making sure that we're getting the worst roads and the worst sewers. So sometimes that's leaving something that maybe needs to be replaced. But when you get those synergies, that's when we get the best value for our tax dollars or the utility fees that we charge to the residents. Then my other sort of comment. So I'm expecting that with the, as you go with the new council, as to seeing that rationale as we go into these programs in the capital budget in the future. A question, if I may, Mayor Sulz. So you put in your report, Mr. Black, a cutout of a piece of pipe, of a 6-inch ductile iron pipe there with the barnacles. Of course, it has a nice visual impact on us that tends to say, oh, that's terrible, we need to do something about that. Will the consideration on pigging these lines or scouring these lines, because this appears to me, even though it was installed in the 1943, so a long time ago, it may still be a very good piece of pipe with a scouring program with the pigs. So, and you don't have to answer it emphatically, but I just maybe a general comment, because I hate to dig up pipe just because it's really old doesn't mean that it's can't be rehabilitated. So maybe just a comment on that.
Mr. Black, comment on that.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, to Councillor Palmer. Absolutely correct, and our operations folks are very keen on pigging projects here. Unfortunately, when they reach this state, you plug the pipes and you almost have to have a receiving valve and an opening just to get all of the barnacles out. But definitely a project that our operations folks are very keen on undertaking. And with the funding that we now have available for the R&R pipe and O&M of the pipe, we will be undertaking those pigging operations where we can in order to minimize replacement of pipe. And as you stated, that pipe looks very good. It still almost looks like it's got a full wall thickness. And by maintaining it properly, we probably wouldn't need to replace it. However, with those barnacles, what does happen is that the volume of water that technically could flow through a brand new pipe is unable to, because the pipe is so rough. And so having a 6-inch diameter pipe in this case would be the equivalent of maybe a 4.5 or 5-inch pipe, which equates to about a 20 to 25% decrease in the available area for the water to flow. So it does have impacts overall in the system by having these barnacles. And our water model, which will be coming forward to council, that I'm hopeful in the next few weeks, our master plan does talk to some of these items. And actually having to tweak some of the numerical values in the model in order to make the flow rates work at the fire hydrants. And that is due to the roughness of those pipes. And so it all fits together. As you said, maintenance is so important, replacing the older pipes to minimize disruption, and coordination of that work with surface work so that we don't end up cutting a road apart that we just paved.
Thank you. Follow? No, that's good. No. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Black. Any other comments on the motion on the table? Councillor Elliott?
Yeah, maybe just a question, Stephen. Straight shots on roadways, less wear and tear on the pipe, or less prone to congest if it's got a long straight without intersections and bends and deviations in it. Is it more likely to last longer?
Yes, and through to Councillor Elliott, through your worship, yes, straight pipe has all those deflections, bends always cause a higher friction in those areas and turbulence, and so that does reduce the volume of water that can flow. And so pipes are generally laid with as few bends as possible and as straight as possible to ensure that you have the highest capacity in those pipes. And that's the same reason you build a road straight, so that people can go really fast and not be constrained by curves. It's a good analogy in some respects.
But the older lines downtown, they seem, well, from the diagram, they seem generally straight. Yeah. Which is a good thing, I guess. Maybe why they've lasted so long.
That and I would suspect it's also the quality of the work that was done by hand.
Yeah.
Those many years ago.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no other comments or questions, I will call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item 11D, proposed road closure. Mr. Simon, do you have a bit of a presentation before I put the motion on the table?
Through your worship, no presentation from planning staff, but we are here to answer questions should council have any.
All right, so I'll ask someone to put the first part on. Number one. Councilor Palmer?
Yeah. Can I just say as written?
Sure. This is closing a portion of unconstructed Newlands Road. And so my understanding, Mr. Simon, on this, really was no intention of extending this road onto what we call Pine Ridge now. It was probably going to be a cul-de-sac, and so that's why we have this little curve. Going to close that off and have to go through this process just because of the way legislation is. Is that correct?
Through your worship, yes, that is correct as far as staff can understand the historic context of that situation. The only logical answer is that originally Newlands was probably envisioned a dead end and be a cul-de-sac. Pine Ridge Crescent was developed and then it still continued west, but we're still left with these remnants of the historic cul-de-sac.
Okay, thank you. Did I ask for a seconder on this motion? Councillor Elliott is seconding. Thank you. Appreciate that. Any further discussion on item number one? Councillor Palmer?
Yeah, it's basically a housekeeping item and it allows the development to proceed on Newlands Road.
Perfect. All right. No other comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Item number two. Councillor Gillette.
Road closure bylaw number 2339 be read a first, second, and third time.
Seconder for the motion, Councillor Palmer. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried. Item number three. Councillor Gillette.
That advertisements of council's intention to close and sell the road closure area be published in the newspaper as per section 40 and 94 of the community charter.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Palmer, any discussion on this? Councillor Elliott.
So selling, so the developer in that site, are they likely to be the purchaser?
Any comment, Mr. Simon? I believe so.
Through your worship, yes, this is a requirement for their subdivision. And before the subdivision can be registered, the road needs to be closed, or rather that portion of the road, and then they would need to purchase it from the city to consolidate it with their subdivision application.
And it's not a city lot size. It could never be a unit on its own.
Through your worship, no, it's only 81.6 square meters in size and has a very irregular shape.
Okay, so there's no value to anyone.
All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Moving on to item 11E, official community plan supporting document. Someone want to put item 1 on? Councillor Charlotte.
That the official community plan bylaw implementation strategy be approved.
Seconder for the motion, Councillor Ryan. Discussion on this motion, Councillor Charlotte.
Thank you, Worship. This is the strategy that I think will help make sure that the OCP does get implemented and does get obviously, but followed along with over the next few years and not just sitting on a shelf to be forgotten or left behind. I like the check-ins on monitoring measurements that can be regularly checked in on over time in a strategic way rather than whatever the current priority is.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Ryan, did you have a comment? This is basically what we were talking about when the OCP was adopted, was that strategy to look at it on a regular basis to make sure it is up to date for the community. So that's it. Any comment, Councillor Palmer?
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. I'm just wondering if the planner has any comments, or it's just as presented in here.
Mr. Simon, comment?
Through your worship, no main comments. Staff have provided an overview previously with the presentation of the OCP, and we do feel that this is integral to ensure consistent check-ins with council and the community, as well as to demonstrate transparency with the community as to how we are doing at implementing the OCP.
Great. Follow-up, Councillor?
Yeah, so Mayor Sulz, I'm supportive of the motion. It's a lot of material, and we've been through a long history on this. It's a long spreadsheet, and I certainly didn't check every one in the last week or since Thursday when I received this, but we have had it before us before. I think it will be important for the new council to have a briefing on this, probably a workshop, possibly in the community committee of the whole or something like that. I think, for understanding, because this is going to have big implications of the next 4 years. So that'd be my only comment.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried. Moving on to item number 2, Councillor Charlotte.
That the community energy and emissions plan quick start be approved.
Seconder for the motion, Councillor Ryan. Any discussion on this motion? Councillor Charlotte.
Yes, I'm glad to see this report come through council. I remember being in several presentations at SILGA and UBCM talking about these 6 big moves that municipalities can make when it comes to climate action. I'm really grateful to see the local implications and plans for that work. I was meaning to look up a link. One of the presentations I went to had a live website that you could go to look at the various moves and see the impact in your particular community. Because there are some things that you would think would make a big difference when it comes to climate action, and they really don't in the grand scheme of things. And with the situation that we're in with the rising temperatures and changing climate, we need to make those big moves as fast as we can. So making sure that we're prioritizing the right work rather than doing the feel-good stuff.
Okay, all right. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Palmer? And then Councillor Lee, go ahead.
No, the actual plan itself, has that been presented to council or?
Mr. Simon, comment?
Through your worship, I believe that, if I'm not mistaken, there would have been previous committee of the whole presentations. But the plan has been presented alongside the OCP since the OCP was originally released back in mid-April. And the idea is that this plan forms the basis for what's legislatively required for the city's greenhouse gas emission target to be included in the OCP. So that 30 or 40% reduction from 2007 greenhouse gas emission levels by 2030. That target that's included in the OCP, this plan forms the basis for that.
Oh.
No, I've been reading quite a bit lately on the impact. Exactly what I mean. There's a lot of things that we talk about doing that really have no impact, and LED lights is one thing, but it does really in the grand scheme, it's a very insignificant amount. So we should be looking at the big issues, composting, for instance, one thing, why that hasn't come to fruition yet, it baffles me. But I mean, those are things that should be everyone's radar that we should be looking at the bigger changes rather than the small things.
Councillor Palmer, then Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. So just some general comments. Energy emissions, climate change initiatives. This has been a dialogue for a long, long time, and I think we had a staff member, I'm not sure if she was ever replaced, but we had a staff member that was dedicated to this, and it seems that got lost. So kind of I'm fine with this. It's had lots of stuff, but it feels like a lot of stuff rather than concrete actions. And I think that's what Councillor Elliott's referring to. And just a comment on the naming of this. So it's the SEEP Quick Start. And I'm wondering if we should really rename that to Slow Start.
No, not. Thanks for the comment. Councillor Shaw.
I think, and just to follow up on that, because one of the pieces that came out of the OCP was to do a climate action plan. That this is, like Mr. Simon said, this is to do with the regulatory framework, what we have to do, and it's nice to see it with the Revelstoke perspective rather than the general provincial report.
Yes.
But that climate action plan helps apply our priorities and our work, and something that would be hopefully a bit more streamlined and clear on actions rather than all of the stuff, as you say. But I appreciate seeing the bigger picture of things. And to your comment on the idea of a workshop for the next council on the OCP implementation, I think something around this, like the energy and emissions plan, the SEEP, but also what does it look like to do a climate action plan going forward, just to make sure that those priorities are front and center as they move forward into the next term.
And I think that's the intention of staff, is to bring new council up to speed as to what the plans are as we move forward.
So many plans.
Not only do we have concrete action, and as Councillor Elliott wants compost action.
Well, I just think that's an easy fix, and it's just that's one step along the way. We have to make so many steps.
Yeah.
So let's get going.
All right, I will call the question on this. All those in favor? Motion carried. Item number 3, please. Councillor Shaw.
That the Revelstoke Station Heritage Conservation Area Design Guidelines be approved.
Seconder for that motion, please. Councillor Palmer. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Palmer, you have a comment?
Yeah, I have a question to the planner. Can you just remind us the involvement with the Heritage Commission on this? So I'm just wondering, has it been through them, and maybe just remind us?
Mr. Simon, comment?
Through your worship to Councillor Palmer. So this specific set of guidelines is not changing from what was contained in the previous OCP. The only difference is we've pulled them out as a standalone document so that they're still referenced in the new OCP that council had adopted. So they still need to be adhered to, but this allows them to be more of a living document. So what the Heritage Commission has been working on kind of in the background is an update and a heritage management plan. And as part of that plan, we would be looking at revisions to these guidelines. So the revisions to the guidelines have not occurred. The only thing we're asking here is for council to approve them being pulled out of the OCP to be a standalone document, so that once the city's heritage management plan is done, which is what the Heritage Committee has been deeply involved with, that can help inform changes to these guidelines that can then be brought back for subsequent council consideration. And the idea of them as a standalone document is so that we don't have to go in and amend the OCP after, but we're still having the same impact.
So just for clarity, then these guidelines are essentially identical to what was in the old OCP?
Through your worship, yes, that is correct. They've just been pulled out as their own document. And then the heritage management plan, once it is completed, that will inform future revisions to these guidelines that would require subsequent council consideration, but no changes to the guidelines as they were contained in OCP bylaw 1950.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Councillor Ron?
Oh, no, sorry, I was just gonna vote in favor of
Okay.
this.
Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to Parks and Rec Art Galleries Project Phase 4. So, Mr. Nato, do you have a presentation or comment before we put the motion on the table?
Thank you, Your Worship. No presentation.
All right, Councillor Ryan.
The phase 4 of the Art Alleries project located in the alley adjacent to 112 First Street East, Regent 101 Second Street Dose, and 215 Mackenzie Avenue, Virgin Lakes be approved subject to the building owners entering into a highway encroachment agreement with the city of Revelstoke.
Seconder for the motion, Councillor Charlotte. Any further discussion on this? Councillor Palmer.
I have a question. So on page 206 of the council agenda, that's the attachment, so to the report, there's a rendition of the sculpture for in front of City Hall. I'm a bit surprised. Is that a rendition of what we expect to see that to look like?
Mr. Nato, comment
I thought it
on the sculpture.
Elizabeth Corsier?
I thought it was Elizabeth Corsier, yeah, and I just sort of.
It's like a Rob Buchanan to me.
Through Your Worship, I think that was included inadvertently.
All right. Sorry, it's my failed attempt of humor.
All right, I think we got it now. Oh, there we go. There's Rob Buchanan standing there. All right, any further discussion on Art Alleries? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried. Ms. Rousseau, Ms. Floyd, any questions from the press?
No questions from the press, Your Worship.
All right, I'd like to move in camera pursuant to section 90.1A and K of the Community Charter. Councillor Ryan, signed by Councillor Charlotte, all in favor? Motion's carried. We will now move in camera and we'll take a 5-minute break before we do that. Now, Ms.